he's going to be certainly insulate him from any of those scenes.
Yes, well, Blenheim Palace is set in 2,000 acres. It is actually one of the more spectacular palaces in the country. You've got the Great Lake there, of course, which was designed and landscaped by Capability Brown. I'm sure he'll see all those grounds as he comes in on Marine One, the helicopter. But yeah, the fact that we're here, probably a mile away from Woodstock, without a backdrop of the palace and without any view of what is going on around the palace gates, tells you a little bit about how low-key they would like to keep this. Certainly they want the cameras kept away from the protesters and the president kept away from them as well. But I've just found out, Anita, I'll just share with you that they've put us in this field. You know what it's called? Suitably, Fraser's Field. They've put me in my own field. How about that?
I love it. Fantastic. Christian, thank you very much. Christian Fraser in Fraser's Field there, close to Blenheim Palace, where the president will be this evening for a dinner. Of course, the President's Day began with the closing hours of the NATO summit in Brussels. It was a rather lively affair by all accounts. The President came away saying that NATO was stronger than it had been 2 days ago, but he also left some rather disgruntled people behind him. Let's cross to my colleague Lise Doucet, our chief international correspondent, who's in Brussels. Lise, in terms of the reports of a sort of a threat or ultimatum issued by Donald Trump to certain countries to increase their spending on the NATO budget, or else America would go its own way. What more can you tell us about that?
Boy, as you're joining us at this gleaming new NATO headquarters, the first NATO summit here, and the first of this new diplomacy by President Trump, hardball politics. Some would even say it's bullying. And yes, he was talking really tough to his NATO allies from the moment, in fact, even before he got here, with sending letters to the NATO leaders, demanding that they increase their defense spending, tweeting it before he arrived, and then, like a wind from across the ocean, he blew through here. And basically, what came from us, from the reports inside, that he used a phrase that he could go his own way. The United States could go their own way if his NATO allies didn't meet their commitments. Now, we've heard from President Macron of France. He said, no, he never threatened to leave. So the Lithuanian president said that. So it's a question of interpretation, but there's no denying he really is playing tough with his allies. Just listen to what he had to say. Not only is he playing tough, he said he's getting results.
I told people that I'd be very unhappy if they didn't up their commitments very substantially, because the United States has been paying a tremendous amount, probably 90% of the cost of NATO. And now people are going to start, and countries are going to start upping their commitments. So I let them know yesterday, actually. I was surprised that you didn't pick it up. It took till today. But yesterday, I let them know that I was extremely unhappy with what was happening. And they have substantially upped their commitment. Yeah. And now we're very happy and have a very, very powerful, very, very strong NATO, much stronger than it was 2 days ago.
And Lise, undoubtedly, all the participants in that NATO summit will be watching very closely in a few days' time when President Trump meets President Putin to see if there's any shift in the US president's position on what he said today.
Yes, this has really been a NATO summit like no other, described as the most important in decade, certainly the most divisive in decade. Never have you seen such tirades by an American president against their allies. And on top of it, a NATO summit which has a part two. Part two is going to Helsinki on Monday to meet President Putin. And don't forget, a lot of the discussion here behind closed doors is what NATO allies think is one of the main threats facing NATO, and certainly those on the eastern flank bordering Russia. And that's threats coming from Russia. What will President Trump say to President Putin? When he was asked at the press conference, he said, well, he's not an enemy, he's not a friend, at least not yet. I see him as a competitor, if you like. Perhaps that's the way a former property mogul would speak. But in the same way that this NATO summit was unpredictable, so too the President Putin summit is unpredictable. But I should add that since President Trump left for the United Kingdom, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who's got this terrible job of trying to juggle all this very difficult diplomacy of the different NATO partners, He said that President Trump added some urgency to the summit and that there was a greater sense of unity. No wonder that President Trump really admires the NATO Secretary General.
Elise, thank you very much. Elise Doucette in Brussels, and one former UK Foreign Secretary who I spoke to this morning had warned a few days ago that Donald Trump could wreck his own ambition to make America great again if he criticised NATO too heavily, and would, Sir Malcolm Rifkind argued, delight President Putin if he did that. But as I say, Donald Trump came away from that saying that he thought NATO was stronger than it had been 2 days ago, left in a pretty ebullient mood. Certainly something that he can say to his supporters back home that he has achieved. Whether that's everyone's view, of course, it depends which side you're looking at. But anyway, he left Brussels in that ebullient mood to come here to London for the start of this visit to the UK. You're watching BBC News.
Anita, thank you very much. Anita McVeigh there in central London at Regent's Park. In a few moments' time, we'll be taking a look at all the sport and the business news. But first, the weather forecast with Ben Rich.
Good afternoon. There's no doubt that the weather has turned a bit more mixed over the last few days. Some